Good evening, everybody. I'm quite honored to have this chance to give you the presentation of my project. Let me first give some background information about the murder case. The suspect is Kelly, and he is a charming and very beautiful woman who married to a very rich but old guy. And actually, they had an agreement that Kelly can have an affair beyond the marriage. But when the husband really noticed that Kelly has an affair with a man, and he get very angry, and they fight for several times. And several days later, the husband was killed. And there is poison found in one of the wine glass at their home, but the poison is from a capsule, and the capsule is opened. But there is no direct evidence to hint that Kelly is a person who put the poison in the wine glass. And it is quite normal that Kelly's fingerprint is on the wine glass because it's her home. And this is all the background information, so let's take a look at my research objective. According to Jinbo's, in the witness examinations, counsels ask questions, and actually to examine the witnesses, but instead of really demanding some unknown information, what they really do is to create particular vision of the story about the events. And the Christians are very skillfully structured, and their questions are either to support the witness of their own side or attack the witness from the opposite side. And this research aimed at analyzing how meaning is construed in courtroom discourse as a reporting type by means of using logical semantic relations, speech function, modality, polarity, and Tact question. So let's take a look at a literature review. Actually, language in courtroom is a specific institutional variety of register, and the whole procedure of the trial contains the jury selection, preliminary instruction, opening statements, witness examination, closing statements, summing up, deliberation, and verdict and sentencing. And our focus will be put on the witness examination. So why witness examination is so important? The reason is that witness examination is a part in the courtroom in which more opportunities are granted to the counsels to use linguistic techniques. And so the counsels may have a chance to create the stories, and the stories may influence the jury's decision making. And since the jury is a people who can make the final decisions of the verdict and sentence, it is quite important to construct a story. And the rest parts of the trial are actually the institutionalized steps and the reiteration of the story, which has been told in the examinations. So the witness examinations consist of direct examination and cross-examination. Direct examination is that indirect examination, the attorneys from each side question the witnesses from their own side, proving the authenticity of the version of the story. And in cross-examination, the attorneys question the witnesses from the hostile side, pursuing the witnesses by attacking the version of the story from the other side, or even doubt the reliability of the witnesses. So let's take a look at the courtroom. According to Courtroom, there are four main perspectives in a courtroom. First of all is the judge, and his obligation is to proceed the procedure to maintain order and to deny or sustain the counsel's objection. This is very interesting because if the lawyer says something has a obvious leading effect to lead the witness to give certain answers, and the answers is quite biased, then the lawyers from the opposite side can say objection, and the judge can say sustained to support the objection, or he can say denied, to deny the objection. And if the witness say something to directly attack someone in court, especially the opposite side, and if what he said is actually the personal attack, or something is very subjective without any evidence, or is irrelevant to the events, or is actually a humiliation, the lawyers from the opposite side can say objection. And the second part is, second perspective is a prosecution. And his obligation is to support the witness from the prosecution or to doubt the witness from defense. And in this case, Todd is a lawyer, belongs to the prosecution. And in this case, Todd uses his own resource, which is media, to support him outside the courtroom by means of depicting Kelly as a black widow who killed her husband for money. And in court, Todd has made every effort to shape and reinforce this black widow image. And the third perspective is defense. And their obligation is to support the witness from the defense or to doubt the witness from the prosecution. And since this case has gained a lot of public concern, there is a huge group of the defense, and 3 counsels are on the defense. Here's Alan Shore, Danny Crane, and Brad Chase. Kelly is a suspect. And the first witness is questioned by Brad, and the rest 2 questioned by Alan. The last is jury, but they are the most important. Their obligation is to listen to the counsels and witnesses, and actually they have no right to communicate with the counsels verbally. They just keep silent and listen to their testimony. And they have a right to decide verdict and sentencing based on laws, case by case. And as for this case, there are totally 3 witnesses. And this is the first one, who is a detective. He is a witness from the prosecution. His name is Frank Richmond. And we're going to look at the section of his part. We can take a look at the difference between direct examination and cross-examination. And actually, he is firstly questioned by prosecution, which is a direct examination, and secondly, he is questioned by defense, and this is a cross-examination. The direct examination is always followed by the cross-examination, and there are some points we can pay attention to. First of all is difference between the quantity of the content provided by him. There are huge difference between direct examination and cross-examination. When he is questioned by Todd, Todd asks few questions, but he actually contributes a lot. And in the cross-examination, when he is questioned by Brad, her answers are very brief. And secondly, we can pay attention to the form of the questions. Actually, the indirect question, direct examination, the questions is in HW form, which to encourage the witness to provide more details. And in the cross-examination, the questions are all, I think it is all yes or no questions to doubt the reliability of him. And we can also consider that what he said is actually about the event or the person. I only found the audio with Chinese script because the English script I think is protected by due to the copyright.
First of all, when I got to the scene of the crime, she was completely calm. Her expression was cold, blank, detached.
Did she say anything?
She said it was his heart, and then she offered that he was having chest pains earlier. It was as if she was trying to steer us to natural causes. Perhaps to head off an autopsy.
Objection, sustained.
Later, when we confronted her with the toxicology reports, she just went silent. We asked her if anyone had a motive to kill her husband. She coldly responded that she was through answering our questions.
How long have you been a detective, sir?
22 years.
Ever had occasion to talk to someone whose spouse just died?
Of course.
You ever know such a person to be in shock?
The course.
Is it possible one manifestation of shock is a blank expression?
I suppose.
Did you investigate the possibility that anybody else killed Joel Nolan?
We ruled everybody out but her.
I'm sorry, maybe I missed it. Is there any reference in your notes to other suspects?
No.
Did you mention to anyone that you considered other suspects?
No.
Did you investigate suicide?
We ruled out suicide.
There's a couple of wake up.
Mr. Crane, approach please.
Okay. Let's finish an interesting section and we continue to the boring section. Let me introduce my methodology. So let's take a look at my table. And there are altogether 9 columns. And the framework of the analysis is based on SFG. And the first 3 columns are the number of sentences talked by a single speaker. And this is collected in the unit of clause complex. And this can show us how information is provided by terms. And the second column is to identify the speaker. And this has a relation to the speak function, because usually the subject of an offer is the speaker and subject of a comment is addressee. And who is using we can identify who is using what speech function. And the third column is logical semantic relations analyzed by in the unit of the clause as well as clause complex. And actually it has a function of offering clues about how stories are created. And altogether there are 3 types of expansions: elaboration, extension, enhancement. As for elaboration, that is to restate or specify what has been told. And as for extension, that is to add some new information. And as for enhancement, that is to attach some, especially some circumstantial elements to what has been told. And there are 2 types of projections, the mental and the verbal, and they can respectively can be in either direct quotation or in indirect reporting forms. And the middle 3 columns, first one is clause, because clause is one of the most basic units in SFG. So I collect the clauses. So and the second one is the subject. Concerning the subject, we can examine the conversation, whether it is a one-way or it is a two-way, by means of identifying how interactants position one another in dialogue. And as for the speech function, they are either giving or demanding. And if they are demanding goods and service, that is offer, that giving the information, that is statement. And if it is demanding the good and service, that is comment. Demanding the information, that is a question. And it has a function of examining the speech type, what speech type of stories are presented. And we can see the conversation is the real process of demanding unknown information or not. And the last 3 columns are modality, polarity, and tact. As for modality, according to Halliday and this gentleman, whose name is very complicated, and modality reviews intermediate degrees between the positive and negative, that is construing the uncertainty, and we can see how participants assess the information being exchanged. And polarity, that is to concern the clause as well. I consider the polarity of clause as well as the polarity of the tag. And we can examine the expected answer or reaction of the listeners. I use the word listener because in the form of a conversation, the so-called addressee is a witness, but actually the real audience in the courtroom is the jury. What has been said by the counsels actually direct to the juries. And as for attack, it serves to signal explicitly that a response is required and what kind of response is expected. As for data collection, the criteria for data collection, first of all, the data are collected in the unit of clause. And second, the clause complex carried out by a single speaker is taken into consideration. And third, there are totally 94 clauses in direct examination and 106 clauses in cross-examination. And let me recall your memory about what we have watched in the video. And this is a table analyzing the direct and cross-examinations of the detective. 21 clauses are in the direct examination and 24 clauses are in the cross-examination. We can see that in total there is only one modality is used. We will talk about it later. And this is about the analysis of the subjects and speech function. And we can see that actually in the content of the questions and answers, the majority of the subjects are non-interactants, and there are several findings. In direct examination, taught demands little, while the detective states a lot. We can see in the direct examination, the question actually is more than 0% because he asked one question, but it's too tiny, so it comes nearly the 0%. And in direct examination, the majority of conversation focuses on non-interactants. And in the cross-examination, the questions by Brad and statements by detective occupies half and half. That is very, I like to say it's a normal conversation form because one person is asking and another is demanding, is answering. And distribution of the three types of subjects is not extreme because they are nearly similar. And the only offer and comment occurs between the judge and the defense, which is a procedure thing, just like the objection and sustain. And as for the modality of this part, there is only one modality used. That is detective say Kelly. She was trying perhaps to head off an autopsy. And detective doubts Kelly's motivation of saying her husband may die naturally due to the heart disease. And in this modality, we can see that the detective omits the mental projections such as I think to make the statements more likely to be objective, and using perhaps to make the meaning softened as well as protect himself from being accused of personal attack. And as for the polarity, all positive in direct examination, and there are only 2 out of 24 negative in cross-examination. And all the 2 negatives are all occurred in answering Brad's doubting with repetition of there are only 2 negatives, answered by the detectives. And the detectives also contribute twice ruled out, such as we ruled out suicide, we ruled out any other suspect but her. And thus the difference is quite an advantage because they say the negative in polarity. Yes. And as for Tact, none is used because the protection does not use in order to protect the witness. And the defense does not use because Brad has successfully forced the detective to give the answers of negative in polarity. Okay, this is the second witness who is a housekeeper, and her name is Frances Stotler. And there are also 2 parts, the direct examination followed by the cross-examination, and there are some points we can pay attention. This section is actually one of the climaxes of the episode, and the type questions are used with one highly marked one, did they not? The sentence is like, they had an agreement, did they not? And the questions put forward in negative polarity, that the question is put forward by Alan, and he asked you do not like Kelly. And actually, the housekeeper is very talkative and eloquent, but the jury's attention may be disappointedly be distracted by Alan's performance. So let's take a look at it.
He threatened to leave her, and he was screaming at her, "You're out of the will! You're out of the will!" 2 days later, she killed him.
Objection sustained. The last remark is stricken.
Ms. Stadler, could you describe the defendant's relationship with the decedent?
It wasn't good. He was increasingly angry over her affair.
Calling your attention to the evening of December 13th this past year, did you have opportunity to hear a conversation between the defendant and her boyfriend, that man seated there, Justin Murray?
It was an argument.
Can you tell us what you heard, ma'am?
Well, Mr. Murray, the boyfriend, was very upset that she was still having sex with her husband. And she said, look at the bright side. His heart isn't very good. Sex increases the chance of his having a coronary.
Thank you.
I said that as a joke.
I'll visit you in jail.
Come to the witness.
Cross-examination.
Miss Stadler, when I asked you a week ago why you suspected my client of her husband's death, you never mentioned this remark made to the boyfriend about sex and coronaries, did you?
I wanted to keep that nugget for trial.
You don't like Kelly Nolan?
No, I don't.
Of course not. You looked after Mr. Nolan, she got to spend his money. Mr. Nolan and his wife had an arrangement, did they not? Where she was permitted to date other men?
All I can tell you is he wasn't happy about her and the boyfriend.
Was he angry about it?
Yes.
Did he ever despair over it?
Sometimes.
In fact, he suffered a few bouts of depression over the last couple of years, didn't he?
Minor.
Mr. Shore, what are you doing? Just loosening up, Your Honor. Did you kill Joe Nolan?
What?
Yet you had access to the line!
Mr. Shore, you better have a good faith basis for this.
I'd love to have a basis, but since the police didn't investigate the possibility, I'm limited. It would have been so nice if the police had actually gathered evidence for the purpose of arriving at a conclusion instead of supporting a preconceived one. Don't you object?
That is stricken. I will seek counsel in chambers. I warned you.
Back to the boring part. This is a table to analyze the direct and cross-examination of the housekeeper. There are in total 28 clauses in direct examination and 50 clauses in cross-examination. And we can see that in the direct examination, the housekeeper used verbal projection, which is directly quoting the location. And he was screaming at her, "You're out of will, you're out of will." So there are so many ways to state this information. But the housekeeper chose to quote the locations directly. That is actually the vivid reiteration of what has happened. And in the cross-examination, the housekeepers, we can see that Alan continuously asked questions about, was he angry about it? Did he ever despair over it? In fact, he suffered a few bouts of depression over the last couple of years, didn't he? And we can see the housekeeper's decrease of sureness from polarity to modality. And yes, that is a positive in polarity. And sometimes that is a modality of medium value. And minor, that is modality of low value. And we can see that actually the difference is advantageous. And as for the subject and speech function, there is one more speech function because they have they address the people such as Mr. Shore, Mrs. Stotler, and Your Honor to the judge. And there are several findings. In direct and cross-examination, the statements occupy the same procedures. That's very interesting because the questions are, relatively little, but the percentage of the statement are quite high. But in the direct, 16 out of 18 stated by the housekeeper. That is, in direct examination, the housekeeper is mainly contributes the information. And in cross-examination, 20 out of 32 statements is said by Alan. That is evidence to show that actually the housekeeper is hiding the information from the counsels from Alan, and this action of hiding information actually causes troubles, and the defense tries to narrate instead of questioning. That is because of the personality of the housekeeper. Questioning her actually increases the risk, and prosecution uses CHEN Jie to command the service of giving details from the housekeeper instead of using the form of common questions. That is a way to show respect, and thus can help to build the positive image of the housekeeper, and thus to undermine Kelly as a suspect. And as for modality, in direct examination, the modality are all implicitly subjective probability with low value, inviting the housekeeper to give more details of Kelly's affair. And in cross-examination, much more modalities are used because Alan uses never, which is a high value, to doubt the reliability of the housekeeper, and use modality of low value 3 times to sustainably doubt the authenticity of the housekeeper's depiction of Kelly's affair. And as for polarity, in direct examination, 2 negative statements provided by the housekeeper, showing the tension between Kelly and her husband. And in cross-examination, Alan used negative for 8 times, either stating or questioning, expecting answers, certain answers to show a biased perspective of the housekeeper. And as for tag, non-tag question in direct examination, because as a friendly side, there is no need for urgent answers. But in cross-examination, 3 tag questions are used. Actually, they have the leading effect to certain answers, which can be used to attack the housekeeper's reliability. The most interesting part has come. The 3rd witness is a suspect herself, and she is a witness from defense. And there are 2 parts. In the direct examination, Kelly is questioned by Alan, and in the cross-examination, Kelly is questioned by Todd. And the points we can pay attention to is that mental and verbal projections are skillfully used by both Alan, the defense counsels, and this is very interesting, by Kelly, the suspect. And in this section, it is a section in which most modalities are used. And in this section, both the counsels from prosecution and from defense question the witness by means of using statements.
We were making love when suddenly he started to grab his chest. I was sure he was having a heart attack.
What did you do?
I called 911, but by the time they got there, it was too late.
At some point, you learned your husband had both Viagra and nitroglycerin in his system.
Yes.
And you learned the nitroglycerin had been traced to the wine.
Yes.
It was determined the capsules were emptied into the wine. That certainly looks like murder, Kelly.
Which is exactly what he intended.
You're saying he wanted to die.
And frame me for his murder. Even though we had an arrangement, he became extremely angry over my affair.
What about the statement you made to your boyfriend about your husband having a heart attack?
It was a joke. A bad one, but...
Pretty big coincidence, him dying of an apparent coronary.
If Frances Stadler overheard the joke, I have no doubt she told my husband about it, which likely gave him the idea.
How could your husband hate you so much he was willing to die just to frame you?
He was willing to die perhaps because he so insanely loved me, and I was giving my love to another.
You didn't kill him.
I absolutely did not kill him.
That is a cross-examination of the suspect.
Yes, my husband
That was your 911 call?
Yes.
Didn't sound wildly distressed.
I was trying to remain calm to communicate the information in the hopes of saving his life.
Nah, you were trying to appear calm.
Yes. At that time, I didn't know it was a crime. Now I do.
According to Detective Richmond, you weren't crying. Your mascara wasn't even running.
I suppose if I were trying to get away with something, I would have made sure there were some streaks. I might have also washed out the wine glass, swiped it for prints. There are all sorts of things the innocent forget to do.
Okay, the interesting parts are over. It's a table to analyze the direct and cross-examination of the suspect. There are totally 45 clauses in direct examination and 32 clauses in cross-examination. And actually, the mental projections are continuously used. You learned, and you learned. And this is a modality with high value. And as for the subject and speech function, the findings are in direct examination. 1/4 of the statements contributed by Adam, using statements technically to support Kelly's testimony. Actually, he didn't question a lot, but he states a lot. In cross-examination, Todd has asked 2 questions, but Kelly provided 19 clauses, 19 statements, making every effort to prove her innocence. And the number of non-interactions overwhelmed others. Both prosecution and defense achieved their obligations by means of debating on the events, while the suspect is directly sitting in front of them. As for the modality, in both direct and cross-examination, only probability and inclination are used. Discussion on what degree it is possible that Kelly has killed her husband, and on what degree Kelly had the inclination to kill her husband. As for polarity, in direct examination, only when reached whether Kelly has killed her husband, negative forms are used, and the rest are all positive. In cross-examination, 3 negative statements are all contributed by Todd, doubting Kelly's calmness when confronting her husband's death. And as for Tact, none is used. Defense protects Kelly while so they don't use Tact questions, while the prosecution may give up questioning the calm and sensible woman in order to have more chances to state their own version of the story. And I'd like to give you an example about my discussion because I show the logical semantic relation and type here because I personally think the logical semantic relation is a little bit more complicated than the modality and polarity and type question. And I just choose the highlighted part to illustrate my way of doing this discussion. And in this part, Kelly said, I was trying to remain calm to communicate the information in the hope of saving his life. Kelly actually has continuously used the course purpose, which is a logical semantic relation, to prove her innocence, giving a reasonable interpretation of her calmness in order to compete with the image of the Black Widow, which is shaped by Todd, and thus to shape her own positive image and to win the belief of the jury. And these are the limitations of my project. This research only focuses on one episode in Boston Legal, and the outcome represents only a specific case. And the second one is other aspects such as multimodality, paralinguistic behaviors shall be taken into consideration if given enough time, and thus a more comprehensive picture will be able to acquire in the future. And this is a list of my references. That's all for my presentation.